My name is Charlotte Harper. I was born in Oregon on a mild, sunny, early spring morning, with sparrows chirping outside the hospital window. 4 minutes after me, my sister, no, technically my twin sister, Caroline Harper, let out her first cry. 4 minutes. Such a small gap that most people would laugh and say, "You're twins, that's basically the same." But to our parents, those 4 minutes marked the line between being loved and being overlooked. Even in my earliest years, I felt the difference. Not with reason, but with glances I didn't receive, hugs I never got, and the way I was brushed aside like an afterthought. Caroline was always chosen first. My mother, Linda, always called her my little angel, while I was just, "Charlotte, please stay quiet while Mummy's busy." Caroline got a pink bike with a flower basket before I even knew how to ride. I got Lily's old bike, worn brakes, and a ripped seat. When we were 6 and joined ballet class, Caroline had a custom-made sparkly white dress. I wore last year's costume, faded and above my ankles. I used to think maybe I was just imagining things, that my parents loved us both the same and I was just too sensitive. But when I was 7, Caroline fell off the backyard slide. Just a light scrape on her knee, but Mom ran out like it was a tragedy, scooped her up, sobbed, and shook like she was falling apart. A week later, she was still telling the story. To friends, neighbors, even the mailman. I fell too, off the tallest apple tree branch in our yard. Hit the ground, dirt all over my face, knees scraped and bleeding. My dad looked through the window and calmly said, "Charlotte's tough. Let her learn how to get through it." No hug, no comfort, just a Band-Aid and a "go wash your hands." I didn't know what a child had to do to be loved equally. I learned not to cry. I learned not to need. And then I learned to hide my feelings, because the weaker I looked, the more I was seen as a burden. I'll never forget one Christmas Eve. Caroline got a 3-story dollhouse with working lights, opening doors, and a spiral staircase. Me, a notebook and a pen. Mom said, I seemed like the writing type. I smiled and thanked her. That night, I lay in the dark, watching the flickering Christmas lights through the window, hugging the notebook tight, not because I loved it, but because I had nothing else to hold. The only person who ever looked at me differently was my grandmother. Her name was Margaret. She lived in Montana and only visited once in a while, but every time she came, it felt like I was standing in sunlight. She always asked if I was hungry, if I was cold, if I had something I wanted to talk about. She called me Little Lottie, the only name that ever made me feel special. One time, when Caroline showed off a new crystal bracelet, I said nothing. Grandma quietly came over and placed a wooden hair clip in my hand, my name carved on the back. "It's not expensive," she whispered, "but it's one of a kind, just like you." Since then, I always wore that hair clip whenever I felt invisible. It reminded me that someone, just one person, once truly saw me. My childhood wasn't a warm collection of sweet memories. It was more like a diary with missing pages, each one a desperate attempt to be noticed, always ignored. And though I used to believe that if I was good enough, tried hard enough, did everything right, they'd see me differently, the truth was, some things were never mine to control. But I refused to let that define me forever. Not anymore. I discovered my gift for writing in 4th grade, when my essay about summer vacation was picked to be read in front of the whole school. It was the first time I got applause, not from my parents, but from classmates and teachers who didn't carry the quiet comparisons of my home. I stood there, cheeks burning, heart racing, looking out at the seats where Caroline sat beside Mom. Mom clapped politely, eyes still on Caroline's new dress as she showed it off to her friend. From then on, I wrote more. I wrote small stories, things I couldn't say out loud, quiet sadnesses and dreams I'd never told anyone. My work was published in the school newsletter and praised by teachers as mature beyond her years. Caroline? She drew a picture of the sun and some trees. Mom stuck it on the fridge and called it raw talent. When I brought home a district-level short story award, Mom just said, "Don't let it make you arrogant." I learned that silence was a language, and in our house it often meant, we don't care. Caroline only had to smile to be called charming. I had to win things to be noticed and still got ignored. Once Caroline and I entered the school science fair, I built a basic water filtration model from recycled materials. Caroline made a colorful clay volcano. It didn't work. When the judges awarded me second place for the whole school, I turned, searching for Mom's eyes in the crowd. She wasn't there. She was with Caroline, taking photos of her next to the leaky volcano. "My little artist," she beamed. I walked home alone, my award wrapped in my coat as it started to rain. My dad, David, was watching the news. I handed him the certificate, hoping for pride. He glanced, nodded mildly. "You're a smart kid," he said. "I know you'll be fine." I didn't need constant praise. I just wanted them to say once, "We see your effort." But that never happened. In high school, I scored a perfect mark on Oregon's state language arts exam, something only 3% of students in the state achieved. The school held a ceremony. I gave a speech in front of the school board. The principal even wrote a letter home. Caroline got a B+ in history that term. Mom showed it off to every neighbor like it was a Nobel Prize. I used to dream that if I worked harder, pushed myself to the edge, they'd eventually have to notice. But I realized for some people, favoritism isn't about reason, it's a choice. And I wasn't the chosen one. Still, I kept going. I woke up early, walked to school in the snow, joined the journalism club, wrote for the school website, and volunteered at the public library. In rare spare moments, I wrote stories, ones where forgotten girls always found their voice. One night, as I was editing an article for a national competition, Caroline knocked on my door. "Charlotte, Mom says you should let me take the car to Ashley's birthday tomorrow. You don't have plans, right?" I said nothing, just looked at her and closed my laptop. She knew that meant yes, and just like always, I stepped aside. But I thought to myself, let her go. I'm preparing for a longer journey, one she can't even imagine. I knew one day the world out there would see me, not as Caroline's sister, but simply as Charlotte Harper. And when that day came, I wouldn't need anyone to say it out loud. I got into the accounting program at Columbia State University in Northern California. The surprise? Caroline chose the same major. When I heard, I froze for a few seconds. I'd never seen her show interest in finance or numbers, but Mom simply said, "It's a good job field. I want both of you to have stability." I didn't say anything. I was used to silence. On move-in day, Caroline had our parents escort her to her dorm. Dad carried every suitcase to the 3rd floor. Mom arranged everything, from pillows to a lavender-scented diffuser. Her room was spacious, sunny, with a view of the campus garden. Me? I signed in alone. My room was half the size, in the basement, damp with peeling paint. It took me nearly a week to clean and hang a few old photos of Grandma to make it feel less cold. My parents paid all of Caroline's tuition and living expenses. She got a brand new laptop, a family credit card, and a bank account that was topped up every month. She posted photos of sushi dinners, new purses, and parties with friends. I was different. I got a partial scholarship and had to cover the rest on my own. I worked as a library assistant at night and cleaned classrooms early in the morning. Every day I woke up at 5 a.m. to sweep 3 floors before my first class. I used to think being a janitor would be shameful, but then I realized, what's shameful about trying to survive? I also signed up to tutor high school students. Each week I taught 3 basic math classes and 2 SAT prep sessions. Afterward, I'd rush back to the dorm to study. Caroline? She'd usually be lounging in the common room with a face mask on, watching movies and complaining about the stress of school. I knew people probably thought I was too intense, but I didn't have a choice. I had no safety net, no backup plan. I couldn't afford to fail. One time, while mopping the 3rd floor of the business building, I overheard Caroline laughing in the hallway. She was bragging to a classmate about a party the night before. "My twin sister? She's probably buried in her books somewhere, maybe cleaning a classroom. I didn't respond. I just tightened my grip on the mop and kept going. Still, I didn't let bitterness take over. I spent my free time reading advanced accounting materials, attending small seminars, and volunteering at Excel workshops for freshmen. Once, when Professor Allen asked a question about financial reporting standards and no one answered, I raised my hand. He nodded with approval, then came up to me after class and said, "Charlotte, you've got what it takes for audit work. I'd like to recommend you for a winter internship at my firm. What do you think?" I was speechless. That night, I called home, excited to share the news with my mom. I was hoping just one congratulatory word would warm my heart, but all she said was, that's nice. Caroline just signed up for a therapeutic yoga class, supposed to be really good for mental health." I stayed silent. I didn't blame them anymore. I just felt lighter, because I finally understood that their validation wasn't necessary for my success. While Caroline drove to school in the car my parents bought, I rode an old bike to work at a grocery store. When she talked about summer in Hawaii with her friends, I spent my break in Professor Allen's storage room, sorting receipts and writing practice reports. I didn't have glamorous check-ins or shiny party videos, but I had something she didn't: control over my own life. And I began to believe, maybe because no one paved the way for me, I had to learn how to build my own. A road that might be rough, but it's mine. I started my 5th semester with a kind of determination I hadn't expected. I had learned how to make the most of every spare minute, every small opportunity. While Caroline spent her time picking outfits for the school's spring festival, I buried myself in the library, studying international financial reporting standards. I knew I had no one backing me, so I couldn't afford to waste a single chance. One Friday afternoon, I went to Professor Allen's office to submit a financial analysis paper. Just as I was about to leave, he called out, "Charlotte, I have a friend at a regional audit firm. They're looking for summer interns. Want me to put your name in?" I froze. "I'd love that, Professor." He nodded. "Then send me your resume and transcript by Monday." I walked out of his office empty-handed, but my heart was full of hope. For the first time, someone offered me a door I didn't have to knock on first. That weekend, I worked on my application non-stop, tweaking every sentence of my cover letter, adjusting every period and comma like it was the key to my future. 3 weeks later, I got a call from Forrest and Wallace. They'd accepted me as a summer intern in their internal accounting department. The internship was unpaid, but for me, the real value was the experience. I woke up at 6 a.m. to reach the office by 8, then rushed back to the dorm for my evening library shift. I took notes on every process, saved every sample file, asked questions about every small detail. And eventually, I was trusted with real technical tasks. I also discovered a special topics course on financial risk management taught by a former IRS analyst. It was meant for senior finance majors, but I took a chance and emailed to ask if I could attend. To my surprise, he replied, "If you commit to every session and do the work seriously, I'll give you a shot." I never missed a class. From there, I got invited to an advanced CPA prep seminar, where I first heard about the prestigious Weston G. Brandt Scholarship, awarded to top senior accounting students. The requirements were tough: an almost perfect GPA, a personal essay, and letters of recommendation from at least 2 professors. Still, I quietly began preparing. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell Caroline. I only told myself, each night as I sat alone in my room. Just take one more step. While I was still struggling to finish my essay, Professor Allen called me into his office. He handed me a thick envelope and nodded. "I wrote you a recommendation letter, no need to thank me. Just keep going the way you have. Steady and strong." I nearly broke down in tears. It was the first time I felt truly seen. Not because Caroline was my sister, not because of high scores, but because of who I was. I submitted the application on time. Nearly 2 months later, while I was sweeping in the library, my phone buzzed. A new email popped up with the subject line, "Congratulations, You've been selected for the Weston G. Brant Scholarship. I stood frozen in the hallway, tears rolling down my face. I had done it. That night, I told no one. I bought a small cake, sat by my dorm window, and watched the city lights. I whispered to myself, Charlotte, you don't need anyone to lead the way anymore. You've found your own. I knew this wasn't the finish line, but it was a milestone. Not for others to validate me, but for me to believe. All those quiet years weren't wasted. When the official award packet arrived, I opened a thick envelope from the Scholarship Foundation. Inside was a formal congratulatory letter, a list of benefits, an invitation to the National Recognition Ceremony in Chicago, and one final note that made my heart race. You may bring 2 guests to share this special moment. I sat still for a long time. Outside it was drizzling, each drop tapping the window like echoes from the past. I used to think that if this day ever came, if I was honored on a national stage, I wouldn't need my parents there. I'd stand tall, alone, and smile, knowing I finally felt worthy on my own. But that evening, in my old dorm with its dim yellow light, I picked up the phone. And I called. Mom answered on the 3rd ring. Charlotte, I'm getting ready. Some friends are coming over for dinner. What's going on? I tightened my grip on the phone. Mom, I was selected as one of 6 students nationwide to receive the Weston Brant Scholarship. The ceremony's in Chicago next month. They said I can bring 2 family members. There was silence on the other end. Then Mom said quietly, Oh, congratulations, that sounds important, huh? Then she called out, David, Charlotte said something about a scholarship in Chicago. Dad's voice chimed in from a distance, mixed with the TV. Yeah, she's always been a smart kid. We knew she'd be fine. I didn't know what I was hoping for. Maybe just once. To hear my mother say, I'm proud of you. But she didn't. I ended the call politely. If you can make it, I'd love for you to come. But it's okay if you're busy. I'll check the schedule, she replied. Her tone was no different from talking about a weekend trip to the farmer's market. I hung up. The screen went dark, reflecting my blurry face. Something inside me cracked. Not because they didn't care, but because I still had hope. I thought I'd moved past needing their validation, but deep down, the little girl clutching Grandma's wooden hair clip was still waiting for someone to be proud. I flew to Chicago alone, wearing the square-neck black dress I'd saved up for months to buy. In the grand hotel hall where the ceremony was held, every other scholarship winner had family with them. Beaming parents, relatives hugging, snapping pictures of every moment. I stood alone at the registration desk, wrote my name, and placed a dash in the guests section. The ceremony began. Each name was called and each student stepped on stage, introduced with their impressive achievements. When it was my turn, the announcer's voice rang clear. Charlotte Harper, Columbia State University, a true testament to self-made determination. With a partial scholarship, she worked multiple jobs, secured internships, completed advanced coursework. Charlotte is a symbol of resilience and drive. I walked up to thunderous applause from all directions. The stage lights blinded me, but I still saw the 3rd row on the left. The seats my parents could have filled. I didn't cry. I'd come too far to be shaken by an empty chair. I stood tall, smiled, and accepted the award from the foundation's director. Afterward, while everyone gathered for photos, I quietly stepped outside and called the only person I truly wanted to share this with. My grandmother. She answered on the 1st ring. There you are, my Charlotte. Her voice warm as May sunshine. I've followed every update about the scholarship. You did it. I couldn't hold it back anymore. In the cold wind of Chicago, I cried like the 6-year-old girl who once hugged a Christmas notebook. I wished you were here with me. I'm always with you, in your heart, and listen, don't waste your tears on those who couldn't see your worth. You stepped onto that stage with your own 2 feet. That's what matters most. I nodded, as if she were standing right beside me. Back in my room, I opened the small envelope in my purse. It was a handwritten letter from the foundation director. Charlotte, we didn't choose you just for your grades, but for a life story that truly inspires. Keep walking the way you always have. The big door is open now. Don't hesitate to walk through it. I smiled. I hadn't needed my parents to lead the way. And now? I didn't need them as a backdrop to shine. The Weston G. Brandt Award ceremony was held at the Grand Marlowe Convention Center, a 12-story glass building in the heart of downtown Chicago. As I stepped into the grand lobby, everything felt breathtakingly formal. A red carpet stretching from the entrance, white flower arrangements edged with silver lining every podium. The chandelier lights refracted into thousands of sparkles across the students' gowns, and me, in a simple black dress, holding a worn-out clutch, I felt like I had just stepped into another world. I arrived earlier than required and found a seat near the back of the hall, quietly observing. Bright laughter, warm hugs, congratulatory whispers echoed from families accompanying their children. Some were guiding their moms to the photo booth. Others were straightening their dads' ties. I pressed my lips together and looked away. When the program began, the lights dimmed. The host walked to the center of the stage, introducing each honored student of the year. One by one, they stepped up. Some had developed accounting apps for small businesses. Others had won international awards in financial risk analysis. I clapped for every single one, not out of politeness, but because I genuinely understood what it took to get here, what it cost just to make it this far. Then it was my turn. The host smiled, his voice warm and dignified. Charlotte Harper, an outstanding student from Columbia State University. She has proven that strength doesn't need to be handed to you. She earned her own scholarships, paid her own tuition, actively sought out internships, and never stopped improving her skills. Charlotte is living proof of resilience, independence, and unwavering belief in her own future. Applause filled the hall as I stepped onto the stage. My heart pounded, but my hands were steady. I didn't look at the audience. I walked up, accepted the certificate, shook the foundation director's hand, and kept my smile steady. As I turned to pose for the photo, my eyes instinctively scanned the left side of the audience. I froze. Caroline. She was sitting there, in a deep red dress, clutching a small purse, eyes wide with disbelief. Beside her, my parents. My father stared at me as if he couldn't comprehend why I was on stage, and my mother, she sat upright, expressionless, lips pressed tightly like she was holding something back. I didn't know how they got there. I hadn't confirmed anything over the phone. Maybe Caroline had decided to bring them? When the camera flashed for the photo, I turned away. No nod, no smile. I didn't need a picture to remember an uncomfortable moment. After the awards, recruiters and executives from major audit firms began making their rounds, shaking hands, handing out cards, chatting with students. A woman in a teal suit walked toward me and extended her hand. I'm Lucinda Parks, Director of Recruiting at Everin & Co. We were very impressed with your profile. If you're interested, I'd love to invite you to our Manhattan headquarters to talk about a full-time position after graduation. I nodded slightly, accepting her card with both hands. Thank you very much. That's the place I've always dreamed of reaching. Just then, I heard hurried footsteps behind me. My mom. She was walking over, her eyes carrying a hesitation I'd never seen before. Charlotte, I didn't expect the ceremony to be this big, she said. I didn't know you had done so much. I stood tall, my voice calm. Because you never asked. She froze. Caroline stood behind her, her gaze shifting between the two of us. My father jumped in, sounding slightly flustered. You really are something. But why didn't you tell us? If we'd known, we could have helped. I gave a soft smile, not mocking, just a smile of someone who finally understood. I spent my whole childhood trying to be seen by you, but now I don't need that anymore. I turned and walked toward the recruiter area where new doors were waiting to open. For the first time, I carried no hope of being acknowledged. For the first time, they saw who I really was. but it was too late for that to matter. That night, after the ceremony ended, I went back to the hotel alone. The Chicago night air was freezing, but my head burned with heat. I thought I'd feel hurt, empty, regretful, but strangely, I felt nothing, just a deep quiet, as if, after all these years of waiting, I had finally stopped hoping and also stopped resenting. The next morning, while I was packing to return to school, my phone rang. It was Caroline. I hesitated for a few seconds, then picked up. "Where are you?" she asked, her voice softer than usual. "At the hotel, getting ready to head to the airport," I replied. "Can I come see you? Just for a few minutes." I sighed. Part of me wanted to say no, to shut it all out and walk away clean, but another part, the part that had been the little girl standing in Caroline's shadow all her life, whispered, "Hear her out." 30 minutes later, Caroline knocked on my door. She wasn't wearing makeup, just a hoodie and jeans, completely different from her usual polished look. She hovered at the doorway for a long time before finally stepping in. "I don't know where to begin," she said. "Last night, watching you walk across that stage, I realized I've never really understood you." I sat on the edge of the bed, silent. She sat across from me, eyes red. "I always thought I was the one under pressure, but now, Mom and Dad are starting to say I need to be more independent. They're bringing you up as an example. I know that's a good thing, but honestly, I feel like I'm the one being compared now." I raised an eyebrow. Strange. That feeling's familiar. I lived with it for almost 20 years. Caroline lowered her head. "Did you ever wish I'd disappear?" I didn't answer right away. I thought about the days I quietly cleaned classrooms, the nights I ate instant noodles while she was out partying, the times Mom showed off her test scores to neighbors while mine were stuffed in a drawer. Finally, I said softly, "No, I just wanted to be seen." She took a deep breath. "I'm jealous of you, Charlotte. Jealous that you're so capable, that you're strong without needing anyone. I thought you were cold, stuck up. But now I see it. You're not cold. You're just tired of having to be strong for so long." I turned away. If she had said this earlier, maybe I would have cried. But now, it felt like hearing a song I knew too well, too familiar to move me anymore. "Caroline," I said, my voice gentle but firm. I used to want an apology. I used to want Mom and Dad to stand by me just once. But last night, standing on that stage, I realized I've come far enough not to need that anymore. She said nothing. After a while, she asked quietly, "So now what? Are we still sisters?" I looked her straight in the eyes. "I don't know, maybe. It takes time to understand that being sisters isn't about sharing blood. It's about kindness, respect, and standing by each other, even when no one else does." Caroline nodded, something like remorse flickering in her eyes. When she left the room, I felt lighter, like I had finally put down a suitcase I'd been carrying for years. I didn't need belated praise. I didn't need half-hearted hugs. What I needed? I had already given myself. The freedom to live by my own worth. I moved to New York on a gray day, drizzle veiling the skyscrapers like thin curtains of an unfinished past. The city didn't welcome me with a smile, but I didn't need that. I hadn't come to be comforted. I came to begin. I started work at Everett & Co., a top-tier audit firm with its headquarters on the 37th floor of a glass tower in Midtown. At first, I felt like I was trapped in an endless maze. Deadlines, emails, stacks of paperwork, back-to-back meetings, and the measuring stares of seasoned colleagues. But I wasn't afraid. I was used to fighting alone. Every morning I woke up at 5:30, made a cup of black coffee, and stepped into the packed subway with earbuds in and files in hand. In a world where everyone seemed to be chasing something, power, money, fame, I chased only one thing: the freedom to be true to myself. My tiny apartment on the Upper West Side was all I could afford. One bedroom, a living space that doubled as a kitchen, and a window facing the brick wall of the building next door. No balcony, no skyline view. But it had something I always carried with me: inner peace. Mom called occasionally, usually on weekends. The conversations never lasted more than 3 minutes. "Are you eating well?" "Yeah, I'm fine." "Work wearing you out?" "It's a lot, but I'm used to it." "Caroline's thinking about taking another certification. I told her to follow her sister's lead." I replied with a short okay. No blame, no expectations. We were more polite acquaintances than a family that once lived under the same roof. Caroline messaged me a few times too, sending pictures of herself attending seminars and saying she was looking for a full-time job at a financial consulting firm. Her messages no longer carried that show-off tone. They felt cautious, as if she was trying to find balance in a world that had begun asking her to grow up. I didn't hate them. I just no longer belonged to their world. In New York, I had my own rhythm. After work, I took an advanced financial data analysis course. On weekends, I'd stop by a used bookstore on 84th Street, pick up a novel, and sit for hours by a small window corner. One time, while reading The Bell Jar, I received an email from the project director. They wanted me to lead the audit team for a new client. I sat still for a moment after reading it. 3 years ago, I was mopping classroom floors. Now, I was about to lead an audit team for a multi-million-dollar company. That night, I came home, opened my window, and looked at the night sky blanketed in artificial light. New York never sleeps and never waits. But I had caught up. And I knew I was living the life that little girl once dreamed of, even when no one believed she could. A week later, my mom called again. "Charlotte, are you coming home for Thanksgiving?" I looked at my calendar. Thanksgiving landed right during the week I'd be presenting audit results to the client's board. "No, I'm busy. I have a major project to prepare for." "Oh, I see." Her voice softened, and she hung up quicker than usual. I didn't feel guilty. I felt relieved, because for once, I chose my work, my dreams, and myself over fulfilling a role someone else had scripted for me. Family, to me, had become scattered memories, not because I gave up, but because I stopped chasing. I don't know where the future will take me, but I do know this. Whatever happens, I'll no longer wait for anyone's approval to know I'm enough. At the end of my first year at Everin & Co., I was promoted to associate. Not a giant leap by many standards, but to me it was a clear milestone. I was no longer the girl trying to get by, but someone actively building her own future. I started saving, not for luxury bags or vacations, but to buy something more valuable: choices. I wanted the freedom to pivot someday, to pursue an MBA, switch to financial analysis, or start a business, without needing anyone's permission. I also began to open up, in my own way. I joined a mentoring group for senior year accounting students, exactly what I had once wished I had. Once a month, I'd sit with young students and talk about my uneven journey, the late nights, the silent failures no one knew about, and the moments I wanted to quit but pushed through anyway. One of them once asked me, "Did you ever feel sad that your family didn't support you?" I didn't answer right away. I looked out the window, where the golden sunset shimmered across the Hudson River. "Yes," I said. But I realized, if you wait for others to fill your glass, you'll stay thirsty forever. I chose to fill my own. I used to live hoping to be seen. Now, I live, so I'll never look back with regret. Caroline still texts sometimes, her tone no longer arrogant, no longer competitive. She told me she found a job at a small firm in our hometown and was thinking about enrolling in a project management course. Once, she wrote, "I'm still not where you are, but now I get why you're so strong. I'm trying to learn that too." I didn't reply to that message, but inside something softened. Not because she finally acknowledged it, but because I no longer needed to win. Sometimes, the moment you stop competing is when you've truly won. I still get a few calls from Mom each month. The calls no longer feel like obligations. Some days she talks about small things. the roses blooming in the backyard, a new pie recipe she learned from her senior group. She no longer asks about work, not because she doesn't care, but because I no longer need her to. Sometimes I wonder, if things had been different back then, if my parents had shared love more evenly, if Caroline hadn't been so shielded, if I hadn't been labeled the one who can handle herself, would I still be this strong? I don't know. And maybe I don't need to know anymore. One Saturday afternoon, I passed through Bryant Park and saw two sisters playing tag. The older one slowed down so the younger could catch up, and when they both fell onto the grass, they burst out laughing without a care in the world. My heart tightened, not from envy, but because I had finally let go of wanting to live like that. It took me years to understand. Not everyone born into your family will be your support system. But because of that, I learned to choose the people who are. My coworkers, my students, the ones who trust me unconditionally. I'd built my own kind of family, not from blood, but from respect and genuine connection. In that world, I wasn't the extra. I didn't have to be exceptional just to be heard. I was simply me. And that was enough. When I step off the subway each morning, sunlight hitting the edge of my coat, I don't need anyone to remind me I'm on the right path. Each steady footstep on the city pavement whispers that to me. My third fall in New York passed in a blur of sunshine and busyness. I had just completed the most complex audit of my career for a global real estate firm. The results exceeded expectations, and my direct supervisor recommended me for a senior associate position. No party, no fireworks, just a late evening, setting my laptop down on the kitchen counter, flipping on the kettle, and smiling to myself. I didn't need applause, because I knew, without a doubt, I had done it. Every now and then, I get cards from Caroline. Birthday, Christmas, or just thinking of you. She's now living in Seattle working at a fintech startup. Her messages carry more sincerity now, and I've learned to reply, neither too close nor too distant. My relationship with my parents remains distant. Mom still calls whenever there's something noteworthy about Caroline, but it happens far less. Our conversations are now confined to general questions like, how's work? Or, is it snowing in New York yet? And I only answer just enough. No anger, no desire to fix what's long been lost. Once, Mom texted, "Sweetheart, sometimes I think if we'd talked more back then, maybe things would have turned out differently." I read it, but didn't respond. Because I no longer need what-ifs. I've lived through them, walked through them, and kept going. That spring, I accepted an invitation to be the keynote speaker at a major conference on women in finance. Standing before hundreds of people, I shared my journey. Not sugar-coated, not edited. I spoke about the girl who once mopped hallways in college at dawn, who washed mugs in the library to buy textbooks, and who studied alone at night because no one reminded her she deserved a chance. At the end of my speech, I said, "We don't need anyone else to validate our worth. We can do that ourselves. Through every small action, every time we stand up again, and every time we choose ourselves instead of pleasing others." As I stepped off the stage, an older woman approached me and held my hand. "Thank you for saying what so many of us never dared to admit, that sometimes the absence of family support doesn't weaken us, it makes us stronger than we ever imagined." I nodded, heartwarming in a way no words could fully explain. That night, I walked across the Brooklyn Bridge, the lights reflecting on the water like strands of golden thread. The city was still bustling, still in motion, but inside me, there was a rare stillness. It took me years to understand this. Blood doesn't guarantee support. Family isn't just where we're born. It's where someone genuinely wants to see us grow. And sometimes, that place isn't the home we grew up in, but the relationships we choose to keep. The ones who walk beside us, the ones who believe in us, and even ourselves. I don't blame my family. Not anymore. They lived the way they knew, loved the way they could. But I've also learned that I have the right to reject love that's hollow, without heart. I choose to love myself. The girl who once sat by the dorm window with a small cake to celebrate her scholarship. The woman now standing strong on her own, without needing anyone to lead the way. I don't live for recognition. I live so I'll never have to bow my head to myself. And in that, Charlotte Harper is no longer the daughter who can handle herself. She's the one who rewrote the meaning of worth, of family, and of love, through lived experience, not borrowed definitions. Looking back, I don't regret the years behind me, because they shaped the person I am today. Not perfect, but real. And that, to me, is enough to be happy. Charlotte's story proves that not everyone born into the same family becomes each other's source of strength. Sometimes the absence of love becomes the drive to stand tall and build a life on your own terms. Charlotte chose to love herself, to let go of old expectations, and to find true worth not in others' validation, but in her own growth. In a world full of pressure, choosing to live for yourself is the boldest, most beautiful thing of all. What do you think of Charlotte's choice? Was she too firm? Or was that the only way to truly find herself? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about life, family, and finding your voice. My name is Mary, and this is the story of the day I realized I had never truly belonged in my own family. I came to my sister's wedding, Ellie's, with a simple intention: to celebrate, smile for a few photos, and play the role of the kind older sister like I always had. The wedding was held at a lakeside resort in Vermont, known for its flower-filled gardens and lavish banquet halls with soaring glass ceilings. As soon as my car stopped at the main gate, a staff member in a black suit stepped out to open the door. I took a deep breath, smoothed the wine-colored dress, the only one I felt suited the fancy event, and smiled as I walked in. I wasn't trying to draw attention or make the day about me. This was Ellie's day, and I had long accepted that I wasn't the favored child. But what I didn't expect was just how cold they could be. As soon as I stepped into the main hall, a receptionist greeted me with a dazzling smile. "Your name?" "Mary Evans," I said softly. Her smile faltered for a moment. I saw the hesitation on her perfectly made-up face. Her hand flipped through the list a little faster than usual, then stopped. Her eyes narrowed slightly before she looked up. "Ah, here it is. You're placed in the hallway area." I blinked. "Sorry, where?" "Just outside the banquet hall near the coat check area," she said, trying to sound casual. I glanced at the seating chart beside us. My parents, Mr. and Mrs. Evans, were seated at the head table. Ellie's close friends and her husband's co-workers all had spots inside, under the sparkling chandeliers. And me? I didn't see my name anywhere. "Maybe there's been a mistake," I said, trying to keep my emotions in check. She smiled again, this time more awkwardly. "I'm afraid not. This is the assigned spot." My chest burned. I told myself maybe the hall had run out of space. Maybe it was a last-minute error. But then I saw my mother, standing next to Ellie, adjusting the veil on her wedding dress. They were laughing, clinging to each other as if nothing at all was wrong. I walked over and kept my voice steady. "Mom, can I talk to you for a second?" My mother, Caroline, didn't even look at me. "Not now, Mary. Can't you see we're busy?" I bit my lip. "Just a minute." She groaned, clearly annoyed, but stepped aside. Ellie remained still, her eyes locked on me with a smile that could hardly be called warm. "I've been seated. In the hallway," I said. My mother shrugged, as if that was hardly worth mentioning. "We had to prioritize close family, you know that." I clenched my fists. "I am close family." She let out a soft, icy laugh. "Oh, don't make a big deal out of this, Mary." Ellie chimed in, eyes glinting with satisfaction. "I'm sure it was just a mix-up. Nobody meant anything by it. Weddings are hectic." Her voice was sugary sweet, but her look was anything but. I turned to my mother again, hoping for even a flicker of hesitation, but she just sighed. "Don't ruin your sister's big day, Mary. You should be grateful you were invited." The word grateful stuck in my throat like a stone. Grateful to be treated like an outsider in my own family? Grateful to be seated next to the coat rack? Before I could respond, my father, Charles, walked up, his voice low, like he just wanted the moment to pass. It's just a seat, sweetheart. Don't make it a thing. I stood still. The anger was there, simmering, quiet, not explosive, just something deeper, colder. I smiled, an empty one, and turned away without another word. They thought I'd silently take it, like always, but this time, I wouldn't. I walked slowly out of the main hall, my heels clicking lightly against the cold marble floor. The air in the hallway smelled of silk, wedding flowers, and something else. Something out of place, like me. In my hand was the place card with my name. Mary Evans, Table H, hallway, area. The elegant cursive felt like a slap in the face. I turned the card in my fingers, my palm damp. I had hoped, just this once, that my family would see me as one of them. But clearly, they never had. A soft click came from behind. The door to the hall opened. "Mary," Ellie's voice called, light like a greeting, but enough to stop me. I turned. She stood there, arms crossed, her veil fluttering in the cool air, her makeup flawless, her smile anything but kind. "Are you upset?" she asked, with no real concern. "Because of the seating?" I gave a dry laugh. "I'm not upset. I'm disappointed." Ellie tilted her head, her eyes lighting up like she'd just heard something funny. "You're always so sensitive. It's just a seat, Mary. Who even cares?" I bit the inside of my cheek, keeping my voice steady. "You know it's not about the seat. It's about how this family treats me. It's always been that way." She shrugged. "So what? You still showed up, still wore the pretty dress, still hoped for attention." She stepped closer, her voice dropping so only I could hear. "You're desperate for their approval. It's sad." I looked her straight in the eyes. "No, Ellie. What's sad is that you need to tear someone down, just to feel loved." That made her pause for a second, but then, as if it meant nothing, Ellie laughed. "You really know how to kill the mood, like always." Footsteps approached behind her. It was Mom. Caroline, with a tense expression, like she'd been dragged away from the party to handle something trivial. "I heard there's some drama out here," she asked, eyes on Ellie, barely glancing at me. I took a breath, telling myself I deserved an explanation. "Mom, I was seated in the hallway. I'm not some acquaintance or a distant guest. I'm your daughter." She furrowed her brow, then gave a tight smile. "Mary, it's not that I don't value you. It's just, there were limited seats inside. I had to prioritize people who are closer." I stood still. "What did you just say?" "Closer to Ellie," she said quickly. "Aunt Patty, her best friend from college, the people who were there when she was sick. You've always been independent. I never had to worry about you." I let out a laugh, so soft it surprised even me. "You never had to worry about me, and you think that justifies treating me like I don't exist?" Ellie jumped in, her voice syrupy. "Mary, stop it. Mom didn't mean it like that. You're overreacting. You should be grateful you were even invited." That line cut deep. I turned to Mom, looking at her like I was seeing her for the first time. "Do you even realize how grateful sounds when you've made me feel like a stranger in my own family?" She said nothing. No touch, no hug, no apology. A deep voice came from my left. "It's just a seat, Mary." It was my father, Gregory. He stood there with a glass in his hand, eyes fixed on the floor. Still the same avoidance, like always. I turned to him, speaking slowly. "I don't need you to defend me, but the least you could do is look me in the eye when you speak." He looked up, confusion flickering briefly before fading. Ellie shrugged, like I was a stubborn child ruining the adults' party. "If you're that unhappy, you can just leave." I looked at the three of them, these people I once called family, and suddenly realized maybe Ellie was right. I tightened my grip on my purse and took a deep breath. Something inside me cracked. Not from weakness, but from clarity. If they had decided I didn't belong, then I wouldn't try anymore. And what was about to happen would make sure they never forgot this night. I walked quickly down the thick carpeted hall, my heels swallowed by the plush silence. Behind me, the music in the banquet hall played on cheerfully, laughter and clinking glasses filling the air. But it all sounded like it came from another world, a world I was never really invited into. I stopped at a quiet corner, clutching my purse strap like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. Ellie's smirk, Mom's dismissive shake of the head, Dad's distant silence. All of it swirled in my mind like a broken melody. And then a memory returned, sharp and clear like it happened yesterday. 3 years ago, I went home for Thanksgiving, the rare occasion when Ellie wasn't around, off traveling with a new boyfriend in Portugal. The house in Albany felt strangely calm. No loud chatter, no trace of Ellie's overpowering perfume lingering in the air. Mom asked me to go to my old room to find some family photos for a memory album. I nodded, a little relieved to do something that felt meaningful, or at least included. My room hadn't changed after all those years. The small bed by the window, the old bookshelf, and the high school photos, mostly of me, alone. I rummaged through the drawer and found the photo box, but then my eyes accidentally landed on the small drawer of my mother's vanity. I didn't know why, but I opened it. Inside lay a light brown leather notebook, resting silently. Every page was filled with my mother's handwriting, crowned, careful letters. I flipped it open, not thinking much, until I read the first lines. The first day Ellie went to kindergarten, she didn't cry. She turned around, waved goodbye to me, and ran into class like a brave little doll. I turned the page. Ellie loves the baked pasta I make on Thursday nights. Ellie used to be scared of thunder, but now she's much braver. Ellie's favorite birthday gift was the little nurse outfit I got her when she turned 8. Page after page, year after year, it was Ellie. Always Ellie. Memories recorded like a private memoir just for her. I began searching, like I was trying to prove to myself that I too had once been remembered. I flipped each page, scanned every line, but there was nothing. Not a sentence, not a line, not even the name, Mary. I clutched the notebook so tightly my knuckles turned white. When Mom walked in, I was still sitting motionless on the floor, the notebook wide open in my hands. "You wrote all of this about Ellie?" I asked, my voice small but cold. She glanced at the notebook and smiled, light as if it meant nothing. "I had to remember everything so Ellie wouldn't feel forgotten. She's sensitive." I bit my lip until it bled. "And what about me?" Mom looked at me, her eyes unwavering. "You've always been independent. You didn't need to be written about to be remembered." I nodded, saying nothing more, but something inside me shattered in that moment. A part of my childhood, a part of my hope, and the part of me that longed for my mother's recognition. That memory came back so vividly in the luxurious hallway of today's wedding. Nothing had changed. I was still Mary, the daughter my mother never thought to include in her memory book, and didn't think needed a decent seat at her sister's wedding. A chill ran down my spine, not from the air conditioning, but from the clarity. I sank onto the bench by the window, right next to the coat rack, exactly where they'd planned for me to be. I looked at the name card in my hand, printed in gold script, then at my own faint reflection in the glass. Behind me, the wedding went on. Glimmering lights, white flowers, Ellie's dazzling smile, and her expensive dress. But I sat here, on the edge of memory, space, and affection. If this was where they thought I belonged, maybe they'd never truly known me at all. And for the first time, I didn't feel sad about that. I just felt like I was finally stepping out of the shadows they'd cast over me for so many years, and I was ready to face all of it. I stayed still on that bench by the glass, my heart tangled between memories and the present. Everything that had just happened, the way Ellie mocked me, how Mom brushed off my feelings like they didn't matter, kept playing over and over in my head like a loop with no end. Mary, a low male voice startled me. I looked up. Standing in front of me was Ethan Bennett, the groom of the day. He wore a tailored tux, his tie slightly loosened, his dark brown hair tousled as if he'd run his hands through it from stress. In his hand was a champagne flute, untouched. I stood up, smoothed my dress, and nodded slightly. Ethan. He looked at me, eyes narrowing slightly like he was trying to figure something out. Seeing you sitting here doesn't feel like you. I let out a soft laugh. Really? Because your family decided I'm not worthy of a seat in the main hall? He said nothing. A heavy silence settled between two people who barely knew each other, yet were sharing a strangely intimate moment. Mary? Ethan finally said, his voice lower. Can I ask you something? I met his gaze. Go ahead. He hesitated, his hand tightening slightly around the stem of the glass. Has Ellie ever said anything about me that seemed off to you? I tilted my head. Are you asking if I've heard her badmouth you? Not just that. He pulled his phone from his inner jacket pocket, looked down at the screen, then shook his head. It's just, lately she's been different, controlling, secretive. There are things she doesn't want me to know, and I'm starting to realize something's not right. I paused. Ellie's harsh words during family gatherings still echoed in my mind, but I had never told anyone, partly because I didn't want to cause trouble, partly because I was so used to being dismissed. But something in Ethan's eyes made it impossible for me to stay silent this time. You might want to brace yourself, I said slowly, because I don't think you really know who Ellie is. He opened his mouth to respond, but another voice cut in, soft yet strangely powerful. And if you're still unsure, then maybe your mother can help make things clear. We both turned. Celeste Bennett, Ethan's mother, stood at the end of the hallway, holding a phone, her eyes locked on her son. She was the kind of woman who made a room pause when she entered. Not because she was loud, but because her presence demanded attention. Today, she wore an elegant navy gown, her platinum hair in a sleek bun, and her eyes sharp enough to see through anything. She walked closer and handed the phone to Ethan. Look. Ethan took it, his finger swiping across the screen. First, a furrowed brow, then a stunned expression. I saw his hand tremble slightly as he scrolled. I couldn't see the messages, but his expression changed. From confusion to anger, then to something deeper, broken. Ethan's voice cracked. She told her best friend she was training me to be the perfect husband, said I was too predictable, and as long as she stayed sweet in front of you, this house would be hers. Celeste nodded. There are also messages to her stylist. Ellie said that a few months after the wedding, she'd find a way to make you dependent. And then, everything will be mine. That's a direct quote. I looked at Ethan. His face had gone pale, his shoulders tense, like he was bracing against an invisible weight. I can't believe this, he whispered. Mom, why do you have these messages? Celeste glanced at me, then answered. A friend of mine works at the studio Ellie hired her stylist from. They accidentally sent the backup file to my email when I rescheduled a fitting, and I read it. Ethan sank into a chair, still gripping the phone. The air around us felt frozen. I sat beside him, saying nothing. Part of me hurt for him, but another part knew this was the moment when buried truths finally came to light. Celeste stood there, silent for a few seconds, then said gently, Mary, thank you for not turning away. I gave a small nod. I didn't need thanks. I just wanted the truth, not to stay buried. And from here on out, I knew this wedding would no longer go the way they had planned, and Ellie would no longer control everything the way she thought she could. The air in the private conference room on the resort's second floor felt heavy. No one spoke when the door closed behind us. Only the hum of the AC and the faint breeze slipping through a slightly open window. Ethan sat at the head of the table, his eyes blank. Celeste stood behind him, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder like the only anchor left. I sat slightly to the right, hands in my lap, trying to stay composed even though my heart pounded so loud I was sure everyone could hear it. The door opened again. Ellie walked in with my mother, Caroline. Mom looked confused, but Ellie didn't. She held on to her usual air of confidence, only now there was a flicker of caution in her eyes. And worry. "What's going on here?" Ellie asked, her voice slightly high-pitched as if she was trying to regain control. "Why are you all pulling people out of the wedding?" Ethan stood up, and the look in his eyes was no longer shock. It was a cold, clear resolve. He pulled a white envelope from the pocket of his suit jacket and placed it firmly on the table. "You know what this is?" Ellie stared at the envelope, saying nothing. "Petition to annul the marriage," he said, his voice unwavering. "And, in case you care, I've already signed it." The room fell silent. My mother gasped, her hand covering her mouth. Ellie stepped back, her lips pressed tightly together. "You are joking, right?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm. Celeste spoke up, her tone sharp as a blade. "We read all of your messages, Ellie. Every word you said about Ethan, about me, about this family. There's no denying any of it." I did." "Don't." Ethan cut her off, and for the first time, his voice carried both hurt and fury. "You called my mother a rich old woman who only knows how to write checks. You told your friend you'd have it all under control 6 months after the wedding. You called me too easy to manipulate. Just pretend to be fragile and you get anything you want." "Want me to quote more?" Ellie froze. I looked at my mom. She stood still, her face pale as if she was seeing her daughter's true self for the first time. "Those were jokes," Ellie said, her voice hoarse. "Messages between friends. Not serious." Celeste gave a short, bitter laugh. "And what about the divorce consultation you filed last month? Was that a joke too?" That's when I saw my father, Robert, enter the room, his expression heavy. I didn't know who had called him, but his presence seemed to make the room sink deeper into tense silence. "Is this true?" he asked, looking straight at Ellie. Ellie didn't respond. Robert turned to my mother. "Did you know about this?" Mom shook her head weakly. I didn't think Ellie could do something like this." "You never think," he said slowly. "You've never looked at what's really going on." Then he turned toward me, and for the first time in many years, he didn't avoid my eyes. "Mary," he said, "I'm sorry." Both Mom and I were stunned. I had never heard him say sorry, especially not to me. "I've been silent for too long. Let everything veer off course," he went on. "And I know you were right about Ellie. About everything." I didn't know how to react. Part of me had grown so used to being overlooked that this recognition left me breathless. Ellie snapped out of it. "You're taking her side?" she shouted, voice rising. "Your daughter, the one you've always loved, is being turned on by her entire family over a few dumb texts?" Ethan gripped the edge of the table. "Don't call them dumb texts, Ellie. That's who you really are." "You don't understand," Ellie shouted, her voice trembling. "I love you. I just didn't want to lose the chance to build a stable life." "What's wrong with that?" Celeste raised an eyebrow. "Is that what love looks like? Planning a divorce before the wedding even starts?" "She's lying," Ellie spun toward me, her eyes burning. "This is all your fault. If you weren't so jealous, if you didn't poison Mom against me, today wouldn't be ruined." I took a deep breath, staying calm. "Ellie, you did this to yourself. Don't blame anyone else. You've always been the outsider in this family," Ellie screamed. "Always pretending to be the good one, just to make Mom feel guilty. What do you want? To steal everything from me?" "No," I said, my voice quiet but clear. "I just want the truth to be seen." My mother stepped forward then. She looked at Ellie for a long time, confused, hurt, and finally, broken. "Ellie," she said softly. I can't defend you anymore. Ellie stood frozen. Her lips moved like she wanted to say something, but no words could fix anything now. She turned toward me, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear in her. Not fear of being caught. Fear because she realized no one was standing by her this time. Ellie stood there in the dead quiet room, breathing hard, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. The carefully applied makeup from the morning was now smudged around her eyes. The pristine white wedding gown that had wowed everyone just hours ago now looked tight, burdensome, stripped of the elegance she had imagined for her big day. She whipped her head toward me, her eyes darkening. You always wanted to take me down, Ellie hissed, her voice cracking. You never let me have one peaceful moment, did you? I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. But Ellie didn't need a reply. She charged toward me, eyes blazing, her footsteps echoing against the glossy tile floor. I didn't move. I wasn't afraid. And then, in that exact moment, a steady arm slid between us. It was Celeste. That's enough, she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp as steel. Ellie froze, stunned. Get out of my way! You've caused enough chaos, Celeste replied firmly. If I let you do one more foolish thing, that would be on me. Ellie panted, eyes darting around the room as if looking for an escape. Or someone still on her side. But no one spoke. No one stepped forward. Ethan leaned against the table, expression unreadable. My father had his head bowed, brow furrowed like he'd just accepted a bitter truth. And my mother, the one who once excused every little mistake Ellie made, stood frozen, clutching her purse strap, eyes rimmed with red. Then, Ellie pushed past Celeste, heels clattering against the floor as she stormed out of the room, her long train sweeping behind her through the hallway. I thought she would vanish behind the door, but no. She shoved open the main doors leading back to the reception hall, where soft music still played, where hundreds of guests were laughing, clinking glasses, and posing for photos against a backdrop of pristine white flowers. And when Ellie appeared, breath ragged, hair disheveled, eyes wild, everything stopped. The music faded. Heads turned. A murmur rose. Curious, stunned, then shocked. Stares. The rest of us from the conference room followed behind her. No one tried to stop her. No one wanted to. Ellie stood at the center of the reception hall. What was supposed to be the most beautiful moment of her life, now becoming the stage for the downfall of a self-crowned queen. You think you can humiliate me like this? Ellie screamed, her voice echoing through the rows of banquet tables and shimmering chandeliers. I gave everything for today. Months of planning, picking out every single detail, and now, over a few messages, a few meaningless words, you're going to destroy me? No one answered. Ethan stepped forward, his gaze steady and unblinking. No one destroyed you, Ellie. You did that yourself. She shook her head wildly, tears spilling down her cheeks. You love me, Ethan. I did everything for our future. Celeste stepped forward, slow but deliberate. She faced Ellie, her voice chillingly calm. I once hoped you'd be part of this family, but you never wanted to be a Bennett. You only wanted what we had. A quiet "oh" rippled through the crowd like a wave. People were beginning to understand. Some guests exchanged glances, a few set their glasses down, their eyes heavy with realization. Ellie glanced around, breath uneven. She made all of this up, she shouted, pointing directly at me. Mary's always been jealous of me, always trying to drag me down. She spent her whole life in the background, and now she wants to pull me down with her. I stepped forward, calm and steady, my voice just loud enough to be heard. I don't need to drag anyone down. The truth carries its own weight. Ellie went silent. The tension was tight as wire. All eyes were on her, even those who had once cheered her on, admired her, now just stood there, in silence. I turned to Ethan, clinging to a final shred of hope. You can't leave me. I'm your wife. We made vows. Ethan pulled the same white envelope from his jacket pocket, the one he'd come prepared with. He held it up in front of Ellie. "This is the annulment contract," he said slowly, his voice calm and cold. And I signed it. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Celeste gently placed a hand on her son's shoulder. "Let's go, Ethan." As they turned and walked away, Ellie stood alone, surrounded by chandeliers and glittering gowns. She had once been the center, the star, built on control and appearances. Now it had all crumbled, right in front of everyone. A week after Ellie's wedding, I woke up in my small Boston apartment. No wedding flowers, no distant violin music, no judgmental looks or whispered side comments. Just me and silence. My phone buzzed gently on the nightstand. I glanced at the screen. Mom. The 9th call in 3 days. Yeah, I didn't answer. I'd heard enough in that conference room, in that reception hall, and throughout a lifetime of quiet endurance. I didn't need a half-hearted apology or a performative hug. I didn't need them to keep acting out a picture-perfect family just to save face. That afternoon, as I was making coffee, a text came through. From Mom. "I know you're angry. I can't change the past. But I want to see you. Have dinner with me? Just the two of us?" I stared at the message for a long time. The old me, the me from a few years ago, would have said yes immediately. I would have picked out a nice dress, arrived on time, smiled politely, and tried to think of light conversation topics to keep the mood afloat. I would have hoped, however faintly, to hear her say, "I'm proud of you," or simply say my name with genuine warmth. But that girl didn't exist anymore. I put the phone down. No reply. No anger. Just no longer necessary. That evening, I walked along the Charles River, where small lights hung from the railings reflected across the still water. The crisp early autumn air carried the scent of the breeze and soft laughter from passing strangers. I sat on a stone bench and pulled out an old photo from my wallet, a family picture from Christmas when I was 16. Ellie was in the middle, wearing a bright red dress, grinning ear to ear. Mom sat beside her, hand resting proudly on Ellie's shoulder. Me? I stood off to the side, half hidden behind the Christmas tree. I stared at the photo for a long time, then gently folded it and tucked it back into my bag. I no longer needed to force myself into a frame I was never meant to fit in. Another call came through. This time it was my father, Robert. I picked up. Not because I wanted to, but because I knew he wouldn't call unless it mattered. "Mary," he said, his voice rougher and slower than usual. "I'm not good with words, you know that." I didn't answer. I just listened. "But that day, when you spoke, and your mother saw who Ellie really was, I think, for the first time in her life, she understood how alone you've been." A long pause followed. "Whether you forgive us or not, I just want you to know, I was wrong. And I know that doesn't fix anything, but I want you to know." I closed my eyes. No tears, no pain, just a quiet sense of peace. "Thank you, Dad," I said softly, "but I don't need an apology anymore. I just need freedom." That night, I went home, pulled out the family photo album from the shelf. I didn't burn it. I'll tear it up. I just placed it in a box, locked it, and set it on top of the wardrobe. An era had ended, and I didn't need to look back. The next morning, I booked a trip to Maine, a trip I'd always wanted to take but never let myself because of family gatherings or other invisible obligations. This time, I chose me. I didn't need their forgiveness. I didn't need their validation. And most importantly, I didn't need their love to feel worthy. Because now, I knew. My worth doesn't come from someone else's gaze. It comes from how I see myself. Family might be where we come from, but it's not always where we belong. Real family is made of those who respect you, listen to you, and don't make you fight just to be seen. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is walk away. Not to run, but to find yourself. Mary's story is a powerful reminder that not everyone born under the same roof will give you the love and respect you deserve. Sometimes protecting yourself means letting go of the relationships you once thought were unbreakable. Growth doesn't always come from being accepted. It comes the moment you walk away without needing an apology. In real life, choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's an act of courage and freedom. What did you think of Mary's story and the choices she made? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt, real-life family stories. I had no room left for fear. When someone has been buried alive by a lie, the only pain that remains is the silence they choose for themselves. And I, Abigail Callahan, had been silent long enough. On Monday morning, I walked into a lawyer's office in downtown Vancouver with a thick briefcase and a face void of emotion. The office was small, simple, but tidy. Sunlight filtered through the glass windows, landing on the file I brought with me. Every page a piece of my life, living proof that I never left this world the way they claimed. The person meeting me was attorney Jacob Miles, a young man in his early 30s, neatly cut brown hair, thin-framed glasses. As I opened my briefcase and laid each document across the table, he just sat there, frozen, eyes wide and barely blinking. "This is my passport," I said, pushing forward the U.S. passport stamped repeatedly from Vancouver, Seattle, Toronto. "Here are my rental contracts, pay stubs, tax documents, and Canadian residency card. All dated during the same time Oregon officials listed me as deceased." Jacob flipped through a few pages quickly, then looked straight at me. "You're saying you were falsely declared dead?" I nodded. "And my family used that to transfer all my assets to my sister, Emily Callahan. Not just my personal belongings, but also my grandparents' inheritance fund and some shares in the company I used to work for." He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his forehead. "I've never handled anything like this before." "I don't need you to be surprised," I replied, my voice strangely calm. "I need you to help me reclaim my identity, and if possible, hold the people who orchestrated this accountable." He exhaled slowly, then nodded. "We'll start by filing a petition to revoke the death certificate. In parallel, I'll contact the Oregon State authorities and begin preparing a case for document fraud and inheritance abuse. But," he hesitated, "this process won't be quick. It could take months." I looked up at him, my eyes steady. "I don't have months. Because they're holding a memorial for me this weekend." Jacob froze. "A memorial? But they already held a funeral." "I know." I gave a bitter smile. "But apparently one fake funeral wasn't enough. They want a second performance, bigger, more public, and this time, I'll be there to watch them act." That very night, I received a message from an unknown number. No name, no greeting, just a single line. "Memorial for Abigail Callahan. Sunday, St. Luke Church, Portland." I stared at the message, my heart pounding. St. Luke, the church where I once sang in the children's choir, where my parents used to take family Christmas photos every year. They chose that place to continue the lie, a sacred place full of memories, now turned into a stage for their false grief. I stood by the window, city lights reflecting on the glass. Inside me there was no anger, no doubt, only a cold clarity. I had been discarded, erased, replaced, but now I would return. Not to apologize, not to plead. I would return to reclaim the truth. I hired a freelance journalist who had reported on complex inheritance lawsuits. I gave her every document, from the forged death certificate to the illegally transferred estate records. She promised to keep my identity confidential until the right moment to expose the truth. I said only one thing: "I'll give you that moment." I also had a long black coat, tailored, simple but elegant, not as a disguise, but to match the role I would play at the memorial, the one who returned from the forgotten. I wasn't sure who would attend that day. Relatives, old friends, people who turned their backs on me without a word. But I knew one thing for sure. They would never forget that day. Not because of the scripted eulogies, but because I would walk in at the moment they least expected and pull the curtain down, letting the light shine on the truth they had buried for 3 years. That morning, the sky over Portland was oddly gray. A light drizzle fell, as if the city was bowing its head for something. Or someone. I stood across the small street, looking at St. Luke Church. Once a place of childhood memories, now where my family would remember me again. The church lights were glowing, luxury cars lined the entrance. People dressed in perfect black attire entered with faces showing perfect sorrow. But I knew, beneath that moral facade, no one truly grieved. I pulled my coat collar up, fastened the final button, and slowly crossed the street. Inside, the service had already started. Through the slightly open door, I heard the choir singing Amazing Grace. The pure voices echoed through the sacred space. A perfect backdrop for the tragedy they wanted the world to believe. As the song ended, a man stood. My father. Abigail. She was a complicated soul, he began, his voice slow but clear. She wasn't always easy to understand, but we loved her. We did everything we could. My mother sat below, lace handkerchief in hand, eyes red. She nodded gently with each word he said, as if memories were returning. But I knew. This was just a scene from a script they had rehearsed well. I placed my hand on the heavy wooden door, took a deep breath, and pushed. The door opened with a long groan echoing through the church. Light from outside flooded in like a cold wind, sweeping through the packed pews. Murmurs rippled across the room. Some turned. Some stared. Then one voice, choked in disbelief, broke the silence. Oh my God, is that Abigail? I stepped in, each stride slow but firm. The sound of my heels on the stone floor echoed like drum beats in their chests. I didn't look at anyone. Didn't need to say anything. My presence alone was the answer to every question they had avoided for the last 3 years. As I reached the center aisle, the whole church fell into dead silence. My mother stood suddenly, lips trembling, eyes wide, then collapsed, her body limp in Aunt Margaret's arms. A perfect faint, perhaps rehearsed in her mind many times. My father stood frozen at the pulpit, eyes wide, lips moving but forming no words. The microphone slipped from his hand, landing with a sharp, dry thud on the sound system. And Emily? My sister. Stood near the white flower arrangements, clutching a glass of red wine. When our eyes met, I saw it clearly. Fear. Real fear, not an act. Her hand shook so badly the wine spilled on her ivory silk dress. A red stain spread like blood across the fabric. I stepped onto the platform, stood exactly where they had just said goodbye to someone still breathing. I turned, faced the crowd. Faces I never thought I'd see again. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need tears. I only needed the truth. I heard I had died, I began, my voice steady, firm. But as you can see, I'm still here. Alive, real, and ready to tell the truth. No one spoke. Some sat frozen. A few phones began to rise, red recording lights blinking under the church's glow. Good. Let the world see. I opened the file I had prepared. This is my passport. These are my Canadian lease documents. These are my tax returns, my employment contracts. These are government documents proving I never died despite the death certificate someone submitted. I glanced down at my father, now sitting silently in the front pew, eyes fixed on the floor. I was falsely declared dead, erased from my family, and when I disappeared, all my assets were transferred to my sister. Inheritance funds, real estate, company shares, everything that once belonged to me. Emily tried to speak, but I raised my hand. Don't. Not now. You had 3 years to speak. I looked around the church, meeting every eye, friends, relatives, people who once claimed to care. They lowered their heads, unable to face me. "This isn't a memorial," I said, my voice deepening. "This is a performance. But unfortunately for you, today, the audience has woken up, and the curtain is about to fall." I closed the folder. My chest felt lighter. I didn't need to say more. I had come back, not just in body, but with a truth no one could deny. I stood in the heart of St. Luke's Church, file in hand, my gaze cutting through the room like a blade. No more hymns, no more fake sniffles. Only the suffocating silence of people dragged out of a dream they thought they controlled. I held up the documents, my voice sharp and deliberate, each word sinking deep into every soul in the room. There was no car accident in Spain, no highway collision, no brain trauma, and certainly no death of Abigail Callahan. I haven't left North America in 3 years. Everything you've just heard is a lie. Gasps echoed from the back rows. I saw a young woman raise her phone, her camera light blinking. Then another, and another. The truth was being recorded, and this time, they couldn't erase it. I turned, pointing straight at my father, who still kept his head bowed. "You signed the fake death certificate. You submitted it to the state of Oregon to legalize a death that never happened, all part of a plan. To erase me. To erase a daughter who dared to speak the truth about the failures inside this family." My mother, now recovered from her staged collapse, gripped Aunt Margaret's hand tightly. Her face pale, her eyes wild as she looked at me like I was a ghost. "And you?" I said, looking straight into my mother's eyes, my tone firm but calm. "You stayed silent. You knew the truth. You knew I did nothing wrong. But you let me take the fall and kept feeding the lie to protect Emily." I turned to Emily, my sister who once held my hand walking to school, who used to sleep beside me on Christmas Eve. Now, standing like a statue, fists clutching the stained hem of her dress, her flawless makeup beginning to smudge with sweat and tears. "You took money from the company. Nearly $60,000. I knew. Our parents knew. But instead of owning up, you blamed me, and they chose to erase me, like I never existed." No one responded. No one dared. I took a deep breath, opened the second folder. Inside were copies of the death certificate, asset transfers, government-issued identity verifications from Canada, bank statements, all neatly arranged, stamped, signed. Not speculation, evidence. "I'll be submitting these to federal court and the Multnomah County Prosecutor's Office," I continued. "Forgery. Financial fraud. Exploiting a dead person to seize assets. And if you're lucky, Emily, maybe you'll get to keep a few pairs of shoes before selling everything to pay it back." Gasps erupted behind me. Aunt Margaret whispered, This can't be real." I turned and looked directly at her. "It's real. More than anything that's ever happened in this church." At that moment, a man stood up. My Uncle Frank, my father's younger brother. He stepped forward, staring at me in shock. "Abigail, we truly—" "No one called to check on me," I cut him off. "No one texted, no one emailed. One message. One. But instead, you all stayed silent. And that silence makes you complicit." I placed the final folder on the pulpit, gave a small nod. "This is everything I need. The rest, I leave to the law." I stepped down the stairs, walking the center aisle. Every eye followed me. Some stunned, some averted, some still recording, following every step like a real-life documentary. When I pushed the church doors open, the afternoon light hit my face. I didn't look back. I didn't need to, because behind me, the curtain of lies had fallen. And I knew, from that moment forward, they could never put the play back together. The last light of the afternoon poured down the steps of St. Luke's Church as I walked outside. The breeze carried the scent of fresh grass and the musty wood from the old saint statue by the yard, but I felt nothing except the relief spreading through me. light as if a stone had been lifted from my chest after 3 crushing years. Behind me, the church door hadn't yet closed. I heard the shuffle of feet, chaotic whispers, and someone crying. Maybe my mother, maybe Emily. But for the first time in years, I didn't look back. I didn't need to know what they thought, didn't need to hear whatever story they'd invent to justify what they'd done. What needed to be said, I'd said. What needed to be proven, I'd proven. The rest now belongs to justice. The next day, I sat in Attorney Jacob Miles's office, the marks from my heavy briefcase still faint on my hand. He carefully filed each document into labeled folders, nodding as he checked each seal and signature. "Everything's in order," he said calmly. "The petition to revoke the death certificate has been submitted to the state court, along with lawsuits for document fraud, asset seizure, and false reporting." I nodded, saying nothing. What I felt now wasn't triumph. It was release. Jacob looked up at me. "You know, not many people have the courage to face down their whole family, especially after what they've done." I smiled slightly. I didn't come back to be a hero. I just didn't want to be buried under something that wasn't true. 2 weeks later, I received a notice from the Oregon Department of Vital Records. The death status had been revoked, my identity fully reinstated. A simple name, Abigail Elise Callahan, was finally back in its rightful place in the system, no longer stamped deceased. The news spread faster than I expected. The church video was shared on social media, clipped into segments, going viral under the title, "The Woman Who Walked into Her Own Memorial and Exposed a Family Secret." Over 1 million views in just 3 days. People reached out to me, some with admiration, others with doubt, some reporters requesting exclusive interviews. I declined them all. I didn't want fame. I just wanted peace. The official investigation launched at the beginning of the next month. The Multnomah County Prosecutor's Office summoned my father, my mother, and Emily for questioning. Bank accounts were frozen, property transfers reviewed. What they once thought would stay hidden forever was now in the hands of the law. I didn't attend the first hearing. My lawyer said I had the right to, but I was too tired of the stares. The justifications, the cycle of false morality. Instead, I returned to Vancouver, the city that saved me when the world turned its back. I walked into the bookstore where I used to work and hugged the owner, Mrs. Ruth, the woman who once kept my first handwritten job application. "You came back," she whispered, eyes glistening. "No, I never left," I replied. "I rented a new apartment, smaller, quieter, with a balcony facing the river. Each morning I made coffee, watched the sunlight glimmer on the water, listened to soft classical music. No more nightmares, no more dreams of being chased by the past." Ugh. I didn't return to forgive. I didn't need their late apologies, because forgiveness is a gift, and none of them deserved it. I came back to reclaim my right to exist. And for the first time in years, I felt truly alive. My story isn't just about reclaiming an identity. It's a reminder that truth always matters, even when buried the deepest. In a world where someone can be erased with a lie, the most important thing is not to let yourself disappear from your own life. I didn't return for revenge or approval. I came back to prove that my existence is real, and I deserve to live it, on my own terms. What do you think about Abigail's story and the choices she made? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to follow the channel for more emotional and unexpected family stories. I was just about to make coffee when my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with the name I hadn't seen in ages, Mrs. Helen Dorsey, our former neighbor from Oregon. My heart skipped a beat. Just seeing that name was enough to bring back a flood of memories I thought were long buried, crashing in like waves against a cliff. No greeting, no context, just a short message with a video attached. "Abigail, I truly can't believe what I saw today. My deepest condolences." I tapped the video, my palms already starting to sweat, though the coffee remained unmade. The frame opened to St. Mary's Church, the same one I used to visit every Christmas as a child. Every candle, every stained glass window looked exactly as I remembered. But the atmosphere was different. Somber. Reverent. Chilling. The camera slowly moved toward the altar. My parents were standing there. My mother wore a black lace dress, her old pearl necklace around her neck, a white handkerchief dabbing gently at her eye. Beside her, my father quietly read from a piece of paper, his voice trembling but clear. And behind them was a casket. Next to it stood a large photo of me, surrounded by white wreaths. I froze. Abigail was always a troubled girl, my father said, his voice echoing from the phone as if it had exploded in my head. But we always loved her, we did everything we could. I sat straight up, hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. My vision blurred, not from tears but from disbelief. I rewound the video. This wasn't a dream. It wasn't staged. Their faces were painfully real. But their eyes showed no grief. Not a single real tear fell. My mother added, "It's such a shame Abigail left this world so soon. We only hope she's found peace." I was alive, breathing, still paying rent every month, working at a small bookstore in Seattle. And yet, they held a funeral for me? I stared at the video, a chill crawling up my spine. This couldn't be a mistake. I hadn't gone missing, hadn't had an accident, hadn't experienced any major event that would lead people to think I was gone. This was intentional. I set the phone down, but my eyes didn't leave the screen. The pews were packed, everyone dressed in black. I recognized faces from childhood. My old piano teacher, the former gardener, even Uncle Roy, who hadn't left the state in over 20 years. Everyone believed I was dead. Not one person called to verify. No one messaged. Not a single question. I wasn't just erased from the family. I was buried alive. I slid down onto the kitchen floor, breath unsteady, the organ music from the funeral video still echoing in my ears. I kept replaying the clip, like I was searching for a loophole, a sign that this was all a misunderstanding. But there was none. This was a story. Crafted, careful, deliberate. And at that moment, one thing became clear as sunlight streaming through a window. This wasn't an accident, this was a choice. I used to believe that family was the one thing in the world that would never turn its back on you. That no matter how doubtful the world became, your parents would always be your foundation. But 3 years ago, that belief was shattered by a single, cold, merciless phone call. Back then, I was working at the architecture firm my family had founded in ADS in Portland, Callahan and Hart Design, where my father, Richard Callahan, was the CEO, and my mother, Judith, handled the finances. I was a project coordinator. Hardworking, discreet, never had any major missteps. Everything seemed fine until one day, the end-of-quarter balance sheet turned into a nightmare. $63,000 had disappeared from the project operations fund. It wasn't enough to ruin the company, but it was enough to send everyone into a panic. I remember the emergency meeting clearly. My father holding the bank statement, his face heavy as stone. My mother said nothing, just looked at me like she already knew the answer. "Abigail," he said, each word weighed down. "Is there something you need to confess to us?" I stared at them, stunned. "What do you mean?" "I didn't do anything wrong." But it was his next sentence that struck like a dagger. "You're the only one with access to the internal code for that account besides your mother. You think we don't know that?" My jaw dropped. "Wait, you think I took that money? You really believe I could do that?" Silence. No one answered. Just a flicker of avoidance from the corner of the room. Emily, my younger sister by 4 years, stood by the coffee machine, arms crossed, tapping her deep red nails against a ceramic mug. No defense, no support, just... And then I understood. Emily was the one who did it. She'd only recently joined the finance department. My parents had always adored her, believed she was clever, charming, a natural in marketing. But I'd seen the strange designer shopping receipts in her drawer, the weekend spa trips with rich friends, things her salary couldn't possibly afford. I stood up, turned to my parents. It was Emily. You both know it. You just don't want to admit it. For the first time, my mother raised her head and looked me straight in the eye. Her voice was low, cold. We've had enough trouble already, Abigail. Don't you see? One damaged child is better than two destroyed ones. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They didn't just suspect me. They chose to cast me out to protect Emily. The next morning, I came back to my apartment and found my bank account frozen, my company email locked, voicemail full of messages demanding answers for embezzlement allegations. No official statement, no chance to explain, just gone. I tried reaching out to friends, colleagues. A few replied curtly, most didn't respond at all. I messaged the aunt I was once close to. She replied with just one sentence. You should let this go. I became a ghost. No voice, no place. So I disappeared for real. I left Portland, left everything familiar. I moved to Vancouver, Canada, under my middle name, Abby Hart, and took a job at a small bookstore near the train station. There I was just a quiet girl, living in silence, no social media, no contact with anyone from before. And though I tried to move on, there were nights I lay awake, heart screaming with the unanswered question, did they ever think about me? Regret it? But now, after watching that video, I had my answer. Not only did they not regret it, they held a fake funeral to tell the world I no longer existed. It's not that they didn't know I was alive. They chose to erase me from their lives, to protect my sister, to redistribute the inheritance, to eliminate the name Abigail Callahan from anything that might bring them shame. And they thought I'd never come back. They were wrong. I tried to forget. I told myself it was behind me, that I had survived the worst fall of my life. But life doesn't let you rest. It all started when I tried to recover an old email account, the one I used for job applications and paychecks back when I was in Portland. I needed to access a few old documents to complete my Canadian permanent residency application. A simple task. I thought it would take a few minutes. I typed in my username, entered the password, but the system threw an error. Account disabled. The account holder is deceased. I blinked. Read the message again? No way. I tried again, tried to recover it using my old phone number. Useless. The email had been permanently deleted due to an official death report from local authorities. I sat frozen in front of the screen, my heart pounding. Maybe it was a mistake? A technical error? I opened the Oregon Department of Vital Records website, typed my name into the search bar. Abigail Elise Callahan. Born April 5, 1994, Portland. A record popped up almost instantly. Name, Abigail Elise Callahan. Date of death, August 17, 2020. The cause? Car accident in Spain. Status, confirmed, no further verification required. Death certificate ID, ORD 78, F 6193. I held my breath. I had never set foot in Europe, never applied for a visa, never bought a plane ticket to Spain, and yet I died? There? I clicked Download Death Certificate. A PDF opened, complete with seals, ID numbers, and an electronic signature from a coroner, confirming I died of a traumatic brain injury in a collision on a highway near Barcelona. It didn't sound right, but who needed a perfect truth anyway? My throat went dry as I read. I couldn't even blink anymore. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate fabrication. Someone had created my death, with detailed information, context, even a specific location. And worse, they had fooled the government. I jumped out of my chair. My hands trembling, I pulled out my old personal file. U.S. passport, Canadian ID, health insurance card, rental contract in Vancouver, pay stubs. Everything with clear dates from 2020 to now. Nothing showed I'd ever left North America, let alone died in Europe. I opened a map, zoomed in on the highway near Barcelona, the place listed as where I died. A small coastal town, population under 4,000, no U.S. embassy, no major hospital. The perfect place to stage something. The question looped in my mind like a broken clock hand. Who did this? Why go that far? This wasn't just about cutting ties or removing me from the family. This was about erasing me from the world. Then I remembered my mother's eyes when she said, "Undamaged child is better than two." I no longer had any doubts. My parents, Emily, they planned this, not just to erase me from their lives, but to benefit from my disappearance. I opened my laptop, logged into the Oregon State Property Management System, searched my name, and my heart dropped out of my chest. Every asset under my name, including the trust fund from my grandparents' life insurance and partial ownership in the company, had been fully transferred to Emily Callahan. Date: February 2021, 6 months after my death. This wasn't just personal betrayal. This was a massive asset transfer, legally processed under my name. I sat in the dark. My tiny apartment suddenly felt colder than ever. Outside the window, Vancouver was settling into winter, light snow drifting down, but the chill in my chest was far worse. They buried me with a story. Now I had to dig myself out. I thought I had braced myself for everything, that nothing could surprise me after learning I'd been erased so blatantly. Then I opened Instagram. Not mine. That account had long been deleted. It was Emily's. She had just switched her profile from private to public, and the algorithm had accidentally pushed one of her posts into my search while I was looking up Callahan information. One tap, and the truth rushed into my eyes like an undertow. The first line in her bio took my breath away. Newlywed, living fully, loved by those who always believed in me. Emily's page was filled with photos from a lavish wedding in Charleston, South Carolina. Golden sunlight pouring over long white-covered tables, a towering crystal champagne display, heart-shaped floral arches among ancient oaks, golden lanterns, a shimmering mermaid-style gown, blush-toned bridesmaid dresses, all staged like a dream I was never invited to. I scrolled through every photo. In the middle, one image hit me like a punch. My father, Richard, standing next to the groom, holding a microphone, beaming. The caption read, "For the daughter who always made us proud." I reread it over and over. Not for me. The one who used to wake up early to make coffee for my mom, worked extra jobs to pay for college, stepped in at the office when staff was short. But for Emily, the one who stole money, spun lies, and then went on living like I'd never existed. I kept scrolling. The next photo showed a hand with a massive diamond wedding ring. Below it, a "Thank you to our beloved parents" for funding the entire wedding, including the new home they had just moved into in Lake Oswego, one of the most upscale neighborhoods in Portland. I reopened the property records, this time checking real estate ownership. That house had once been registered under my name by my father, part of an investment he promised to give me as a reward after I'd completed my MBA. Back then, I declined to take it right away because I wanted to earn it myself. Now, it belonged to Emily Callahan Hart. Legal owner, transferred 9 months after my death certificate was issued. I checked the linked bank accounts listed in the family inheritance disclosure. Once again, my name was gone. In its place was a brand new hyphenated name, Emily Elise Callahan Hart, listed as the sole beneficiary of the Internal Scholarship Fund, the joint investment account left by our grandparents, and even a life insurance policy I didn't know existed. I sat there, numb, my whole body frozen. One thought began looping in my head. They didn't just replace me. They rewrote everything so I had never existed. I was once the designated heir. I was once chosen by my grandparents to hold the majority of the savings meant for future generations. I was once promised a managing partner role when my father retired. And now, everything belonged to Emily. I didn't see a single photo of me, not one mention, not even a wish she were here. Aunt Margaret, who used to send me Christmas cards every year, stood beside my mother, smiling. My cousin Dean was clinking wine glasses. The whole family. Happy, joyful, as if I had never been one of them. And what crushed me the most was when I zoomed in on a photo taken during my father's speech. Behind him was a large screen showing the bride's life moments. I saw one image. I recognized it instantly. It used to be a photo of me at age 8, sitting in the backyard garden, grinning. But it had been edited. My face had been replaced with Emily's. Sloppily done, but just convincing enough to fool an outsider. I wasn't just forgotten. I was erased from history. Memories, assets, bloodline, all now carried Emily's name. And that's when I knew. If I wanted my life back, I couldn't stay silent. They may have buried me in lies, but it's that silence I'll now use to awaken the truth.